So our first presenter today is somebody you've seen before. Clyde is a fount of knowledge about a lot of stuff, and he is going to talk to, there we go, he's going to talk to us today about people who have betrayed our nation. And so without further ado, come on in, Clyde.
If you could be my next slide guy, that would be appreciated. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Those of us who served in the Vietnam War, that was the hot war. But you have to remember, while the hot war was going on, there was a massive Cold War going on. And today I'm going to basically tell you about 3 spies that really affected how we did business with the Soviet Union. And these 3 guys were some of the most brutal spies that we had. And they did it all for the wrong reason. Next slide, please. All right, John Walker was a Navy guy, and he had access to cryptology. And the way the Navy did their cryptology was really smart. They had one unit on one boat and another unit on another boat, and you needed to have both units so that the messages could be sent. And the Soviets had no knowledge of this until Walker exposed it. And he did really a lot of damage, well, not only with cryptology, but also with the SOSUS system. Next slide, please. So Walker became a spy when we were putting the SOSUS system in the Atlantic and the Pacific. And the SOSUS system was a bunch of hydrophones placed in the Atlantic so that we could pick up the sounds of the Soviet submarines and know where they were. They had no knowledge about this until Walker exposed it. And one of the big things, not only did he do that, the Pueblo incident, people don't maybe remember the 1968. Okay, so he was giving the Soviets one side of the crypto, but they didn't have the other side of the crypto. So the Soviets told the North Koreans, hey, there's a spy boat off the coast of North Korea. If you capture that boat, we'll get the other side of the crypto. And that's what they did. And that's what caused the Pueblo incident. We know that now because of stuff that has come out. So he was really, really a bad person for the United States Navy and for the United States military overall. But one of the biggest things what he did was he basically told the Soviets that they needed to change how they did the propellers on their submarines. So there's a video coming up. Next slide. How do we turn that on? Just hit it.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Military Gear. Talking about submarines, silence is survival. Therefore, if there is any way to make the submarine quieter and more efficient, it will be seen as revolutionary and a well-guarded secret. There is one part of the submarine which is kept very secret, namely a screw. In the world of submarines, this propeller is called a screw. And one of the main objectives of modern submarine manufacturers is noise reduction. Most military submarines use highly efficient, specially designed screws that rotate at low speed and have a high turns per knot ratio. This helps to reduce noise caused by cavitation. When the submarine is on land, such as during repair or launching of a new submarine, the propeller is tightly closed, wrapped in fabric or some other covering. These are examples of some submarine launch videos. The propeller is always tightly closed. The question is, why the shape of the propeller must be hidden? What is the danger if the shape of a submarine propeller is widespread? The propeller or screw is a basic device that works by pumping fluid and gas. You can either have the screw rotate faster or increase its size. Making it rotate more quickly makes it noisy, and the size can only be increased to a certain extent. A smaller propeller or screw rotating at higher speeds is prone to cavitation. The shape of the submarine propellers is kept a secret because it can indicate the speed at which it will be rotating for the sake of remaining stealthy. If the enemy is aware of the shape and speed of propellers, it can calculate the output frequency along with the engine type and RPM. This leads to the enemy fine-tuning its sensors and listening to disturbances in a particular frequency range. This can lead to the enemy finding out about the location of your submarine even when it is not moving at its noisiest speed. For instance, if a submarine can manage 8 to 10 knots and remain quiet, but the enemy has made adjustments to its sensors for detecting the submarine-specific hardware, the enemy might up the submarine when it is operating at the speed of 7 knots. The shape, section, and pitch of the propeller change the envelope in which the screw can work without creating cavitation. Thus, getting these details will help the enemy to ascertain the performance of the submarine and also give them the tactical advantage of picking it up on their sensors. So, they will tune their passive sonar device to focus on detecting sound in that frequency range. Thus, the enemy can more easily detect the presence and position of the submarine. Therefore, the shape of the screw or propeller of the submarine is very secretive. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please share it and do hit the notification button for more updates.
Okay, so once he gave that information to the Soviets that we had the SOSA system, that it was their propellers that were picking up the certain frequencies, the Soviets didn't have that technology to do that. So guess where they went to get the technology? Japan. Yes, the Japanese built the props for all the Soviet submarines based on what Walker told them about the frequencies that were picked up on the SOSAs. So that gave them an unbelievable edge in the underwater spectrum. Naturally, he was caught and subsequently went to prison, but it was extremely damaging considering where we were in the Cold War. Next slide. Robert Hansen, he just recently passed away. He was no doubt the worst spy we had because he was intricately involved with actually finding spies, if you can believe this. He was the person that had intimate knowledge about where our Soviet double agents were, and he basically turned them all in over a period of time. And it was extremely damaging. And the only reason why we found out about this guy was because a Soviet general decided to come over to our side and say, I don't know what's going on your side of the house, but we're catching guys that are spies left and right. And Hansen was turning them in. Next slide, please. So it says right there that Hansen revealed the multi-million-dollar, one of the big thing was we had a very, very quiet tunneling machine that we were using to tunnel underneath the Soviet embassy inside the United States. And he told them about that. And that was damaging, obviously. And the amount of money that he gave, that he basically got from the Soviets was nothing compared to the machine that we used. It's estimated the machine that we used was like $30 million. Next slide. Aldrich Ames was another bad guy. He was, once again, a double spy. He worked for I believe this guy worked for the CIA counterintelligence, where the other fellow was an FBI guy. So Aldrich Ames was CIA, and he had intimate knowledge of all our spies in the Soviet Union. And what was so bad about him was that he took his time to basically out the spies over a period of time. And we were losing precious assets that we really needed during the Cold War era when we were starting to rebuild our forces. And how I got involved with knowledging about Aldrich Ames is I was an Air Force guy. And so we were trying to build fighters and understand how the Soviets were going to use their air battle concept. And we were getting tremendous intel photos that I'd never seen before in my entire life. This is in the late 70s, early 80s. And then all of a sudden, it just disappeared. We couldn't figure out what happened. Now we know what happened. Next slide. So he basically turned in several generals that were working for us. Next slide. These were all, you're going to see about 7 or 8 slides of people that were compromised, that were extremely high up in the Soviet military complex, that basically helped us and saved us billions of dollars, because we had intimate knowledge of how the Soviet weapon systems worked, their follow-on forces, the whole 9 yards, but they were outed by Ames. Next slide. This guy here, and when they were all caught, they were all executed. Next slide. Next slide. One more, please. This guy was really important. He was a major general, and he basically told us everything that was going on with the Soviet weapon systems, where they were placed and all that, and he was totally eliminated by Ames. Next slide. This is another guy that was extremely important, and he stayed in the Soviet Union almost until the last moment, until Ames outed him, and he was able to escape through Finland, but he almost got caught. But he ended up back in the UK, and but he was extremely important for us in the Cold War. Yeah, right there, it says he was given away by Oliver James in 1985. He got the panic telegram, and luckily we were able to get him out. But he was one of the most important double agents that we had working for us. Next slide. This is another one. A lot of these people were scientific people that worked in the innermost workings of the Soviet Union, that knew how the Soviet Union worked and how their finances worked, which was extremely important. Next slide. This person was 50 agents were turned in. Not all of them were killed, but most of them were actually executed. Next slide. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so this guy was a nuclear guy, and we needed to know more about how the nukes worked and all that. And he was able to escape and basically end up, I believe, yeah, he lives in Rhode Island right now. Yeah, but he was extremely important to find out how the Soviet nuclear forces worked and their warheads and all that. And if given the opportunity next year by the leadership here, I have a real good briefing about how we found out about how good the nuclear forces were in the Soviet Union. Next slide. This is the guy that we got information from all the time. When the MiG-29 was coming out and the Su-27 was coming out and the associated radars, we were getting almost real-time intelligence from this individual right here. And it was phenomenal. And it basically shaped the way we built the F-15 and the F-16, because we didn't really know how the Soviets were going to interpret those platforms. But when we got the information from this guy, we immediately changed how we did business with our radars and the whole 9 yards. And so this guy was extremely important. In fact, most people call him the billion-dollar spy, because he saved the United States military billions of dollars by giving us real-time information on what we could expect with the electronic order of battle when it came to dealing with the Soviet Union. Next slide. Once again, this is another important guy. You can see the missiles. This guy gave us all the information on the missiles that they had, how their missiles work, and what kind of countermeasures that we should use to counter their missiles. And if you remember 30 years ago, when we went into Desert Storm, Desert Shield, the Iraqi Air Force used predominantly Soviet weapon systems, and they were basically null and void against our airplanes because of what we got from this individual.